In my last video, I showed you how to make Einkorn Sourdough Starter. The next step in baking most of my bread recipes is to mix up a sourdough leaven, which is simply a piece of sourdough starter mixed with warm water and flour into a wet dough that you let rise 6 to 10 hours on the day that you're going to bake your bread. It's the first part of your bread dough. So here is my Einkorn Sourdough Starter. I refreshed this last night before I went to bed. You don't need to use Refresh Starter. You can also use your starter right out of the refrigerator. You measure up 30 grams of starter. I always prefer to measure everything with grams using a baking scale because that makes everything more accurate. Add 130 grams of warm water. And then mix that up with a fork to dissolve the starter into the water. Mix in 120 grams of all-purpose flour. If you're making whole grain bread, you can also use the whole grain flour. You just add less by weight. So mix that with a fork until the batter has come together and you don't see any more dry flour. Let it rise in a warm, dark place for 6 to 10 hours. Once the leaven has risen for 6 to 10 hours, it will look like this. If you're working with a new starter and it doesn't look like this after 6 to 10 hours, just wait. You can wait up to 24 hours. You should see some really nice large bubbles on the surface of the mixture. And then you're ready to mix this into your bread dough. Now, what happens if you forget about it and you leave it out for too long? I made this one 24 hours ago. And what happens to it, it basically completely deflates. So you don't really see the large bubbles on the surface anymore, but it's perfectly fine to use as long as you haven't left it out for more than 24 hours. If it doesn't bubble up within 24 hours, it means your starter isn't ready and you should just keep refreshing it. If you get to this point and it doesn't bubble up, but you want to use it, you can add 1/4 teaspoon of active dry yeast and proceed with your bread dough so you don't have to throw this away. You can also put these in the refrigerator. I don't really like to do that because my bread will come out better when you follow exactly the way you do it. 6 to 10 hours, mix up your bread dough. But things happen. So if you forget about it or you change your mind about baking bread, you can refrigerate these for up to 24 hours, take them out of the refrigerator cold, and mix up your bread dough. And that's really what a sourdough levain is. It will basically boost your dough to rise quicker on the day that you're going to bake. It will give it a lighter texture, which is really important with einkorn bread because einkorn has more protein and it tends to bake up denser. So this is the way that I mostly bake einkorn bread. And once you get the timing down and you understand that if you want to bake bread in the evening, you need to mix it up in the morning, or if you want to bake bread in the morning, you need to mix it up in the evening and let it sit out. It's really nothing. It's really not a big deal. You just mix it up, put it away, and then when you see these beautiful bubbles, you're ready to bake. And I think you'll really like the way the bread turns out.